Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Everything You Need to Know About Sage 100 Upgrades and Are Afraid to Ask. So before we get started, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we're going to answer all those questions towards the end of the presentation. In your GoToWebinar panel, you also have the option to change the presentation layout, zoom in and out if you're having a hard time seeing, or download a copy of the presentation deck as well. We're also recording this session, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to be here today. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our closing poll and survey. So, with that said, we're thrilled that you've taken some time out of your busy day to be with us on this session. SWK is always here to help you fulfill your vision of a smarter and easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing these important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. So please check us out and give us a follow on LinkedIn, Twitter/X, Facebook, and YouTube, where we post a lot of great tutorial content in our recorded webinars like this. So I want to tell you just a little bit about our presenters today. Obviously, this is me. I'm Courtney Pollock. I'm the Customer Marketing Coordinator, and I am going to be on today just to help run the session, answer those Q&As. But our main presenter today is going to be Bruce Kern from our Sage 100 team. Bruce, can you say a quick hello to the audience?
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you all today.
Awesome. And then also today we have Noah Corwick from our MCS team, who is going to join in a little bit later today to tell us a bit about cloud options for Sage 100. Noah, can you say a quick hello?
Hey everybody, great to meet you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So now that we've put some names and faces to the voices that you're going to hear today, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce for the main event, and we'll dive right in.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is just some good reasons why you might want to keep your software up to date. You know, for most people, Sage 100 is their system of record. That basically means it's the system that you keep track of your financials in, perhaps many other business metrics. And, you know, as such, it's important to have that system be working and being able to provide you the information that you depend on it for. Ask yourself, what would the impact on your business be if you couldn't give your banker financials for your line of credit? What would you do if your software didn't work unexpectedly? You know, the cost of unexpected downtime can just be really rough. You know, it's always a disruption to do an upgrade, but having it planned out means you're having some input on the time and the place of having that outages. Another big reason to keep your software up to date is that there are technological shifts that occur from time to time, usually with little or no warning. One such shift that's been a recent one is the shift from TLS, that stands for Transport Layer Security, 1.0 to 1.2. For some of our Sage clients that are on the Sage 100C platform, which is probably the most popular platform, it's a subscription model, so it's periodically checking the subscription to make sure that it's up to date. If the subscription is expired, your software turns to read only. Well, due to security reasons and other things in the industry, Sage had to shift their license server to using TLS 1.2. That meant that anybody who didn't have their upgrade done, at some point is going to get messages that their software is turning to read only because they didn't upgrade in a timely manner. So that's a classic right there. Another one that we've seen in recent years is just the shift with SMTP and or email authentication. So Sage has the paperless office. It can send emails out to your customers or your vendors. That piggybacks on your email system, and that email system requires an authorization. So forever basic SMTP was in use. That's now deemed kind of unsafe. It's been hacked too many times. So there's a new authorization method out called OAuth. So being on the latest platform allows you to take advantage of those latest security protocols. Not to mention the fact that you pay a good amount of money to Sage every year. Some people may send the money into SWK, but it always ends up in Sage's pocket for your maintenance bill. And because of the amount of money that you're spending on that, you're basically paying for the new software. And so without doing your upgrades, you're really not leveraging your spend. That is not to say anything about the new enhancements, bug fixes, and so on and so forth. Really, running your software when it's not supported is a little bit like driving without car insurance. It's sort of the cost of doing business. Now, Sage supports the current and the last prior years. Sage comes out with their new versions in April every year. So the minute that Sage releases Sage 2025, Sage 100 2022 will instantly be retired, meaning no longer supported by Sage. Um, so Sage will come out with their service updates for the new version, typically in July. So if you have custom programming or any integrations, typically SWK will ask you to wait until there's at least one service update out. That is to make sure that the new version is patched and ready to go for you with your integrations. If you're a very basic installation and you don't have integrations, third-party mods, or add-ons, we may take you onto the new software prior to a service update. It's always easy to add a service update if you don't have mods. It's when you do have mods we have to be a little more careful. Something to keep in mind about if you do have third-party vendors or integrations, or you're considering getting some, is to think about the impact that might have on your upgrade. You should always talk to those partners and integration people about how quickly they are able to get their software up to date as Sage releases new versions and service updates. Believe it or not, some vendors are, pretty far behind. So you always want to find out if it's one of those vendors and if you're going to be artificially held back, or if they're right on top of their game, and you'll be able to stay current all the time, which is the goal. Let's talk a little bit about the phases of an upgrade. The upgrade is going to start out with some planning that's free of charge. Once you authorize your upgrade, sign on the dotted line, so to speak, pay any deposits that might be applicable. We'll have a kickoff call, and then we'll move into what we call the test upgrade. That's basically where we do your upgrade in a test mode, and then we will release it to you for testing. So your job is to go find out what does and doesn't work well, reporting the issues that you encounter, and you fix them. Then you break it and we fix it. Once we are sure that the system has been well tested and you're happy with the functionality, we will then plan out your final upgrade and commence through the final upgrade. Then last but not least is your go live support. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. We're always there to support you no matter whether the upgrade was yesterday or 3 months ago. Here we're talking about upgrade planning. As I mentioned in the prior slide, all the upgrade planning is free of charge. Free is a good word. That means SWK is willing to take the time to study your system to find out in detail what it is it's going to take to do the upgrade. This does not happen in a vacuum, though. We do need your input. So it's very important that we have an executive sponsor. So that's not just a title. It sounds like a noun. It's really a verb. This is the person who can hold your team accountable for doing their part, whether that's providing information in the discovery or doing the testing. It's very important that we have that executive sponsor to make sure that everything gets done properly. So when we go to do your upgrade planning, there's a few things that we're going to need. We are going to need full access to your server where your Sage is installed, and a Sage login that has full access to all the Sage tasks. That's so that we can look all the way through all of your Sage without being encumbered, as well as look at your back end. So we do need full login to all access in Sage. We do need server access. Another thing that we need to know is what companies in Sage are your live companies. Those are companies that you actually enter new transactions in and keep books for. You may also have archive companies. Those are companies that have historical data in them that you may not be entering new data in, but that you want brought over to the new software so that you have access to the information at your fingertips. You may also have test companies and or demonstration companies. Typically, we don't bring over demonstration companies like the ABC demo that many of you have seen, or frequently we don't bring over the test companies either, mostly because the cost of doing so is far more than just making a new copy of a new test company. All right, so we will bring over your archive companies provided that you tell us that you need those. We do a lot more work on the production or live companies than we do any archive companies. So it's important for us to have a distinguishment there in terms of which ones are which. Let's see here. We may also need access to a workstation. So with Sage 100, it's supposed to be installed on a dedicated member server, so we can see pretty much everything we need there for your Sage 100. But if you have other applications that are integrated with your Sage, or even if they're not, if they're just in use, such as Sage Fixed Assets, sometimes known as FAS, many times a FAS software will only be accessible from a workstation. Not always, depends on the version of FAS that you have, but it's just the point is we may also need access to your workstation. All right, so we will require a free system discovery for all upgrades. All right, upgrade planning, a little bit more on upgrade planning. So you have to be on at least Sage 100 version 4.50. That's actually quite a while ago now. That's the 2012 vintage. If you were below version 4.50 service update 8, you have to do a double upgrade. That means we upgrade you first to the version 4.50.8, and then we can take you from there up to the in version that you need to be on. Of course, that would be Sage 100 2024 as of today. Um, Other things that we're looking for in your upgrades is not only just what modules you have and what companies you have and all the forms, reports, VI jobs, and integrations. We're also looking for things that might have been retired or changed dramatically from your old version to the new one. For example, back in 2017, if you were using payroll in 2017 and before, Sage, retired the legacy payroll system and they came up with a whole new payroll add-on. So if you're upgrading and you're below 2017 or below, you have to replace your payroll. Another one that we're dealing with that's very common today is if you had work order or material requirements planning on version 2021 or below, those have been completely retired by Sage, and there's all new modules called production management, which replaces work order, and IRP replaces the MRP. So those are actually replacement solutions. There are also situations where Sage may just rewrite a module in sort of kind of new code. So job cost is an example of that, whereas the production management is a true replacement in a new module. Job cost is a rewrite. We're splitting hairs a little bit because there's a similar work that's needed in either case. Okay, so there may be other module retirements depending on what version you're at. So it just depends on what we're going to need to do depending on that. But those are the most common ones that we mentioned there. All right, so once we have done your planning and you've approved your project, we will move into the test upgrade phase. The whole point of the test upgrade is to find the recipe to make your final upgrade go as smooth as possible. So we will use extensive checklists. We will document exactly what we did, in what order we did it, what we didn't need to do. Um, we will have you, test it. We want you to basically break it, tell us what needs to polish. If you report an issue, we'll document that as well as what we did to fix it. If it's something that needs to be dealt with in the course of the final upgrade, we will actually add it to our checklist. Um, and an example of that would be we just did an upgrade. One of the consultants did an upgrade, and one of the things we do is we rebuild the key files. That's a utility that we run. So they did the test upgrade, they rebuilt the key files, and when they were checking the data, the customer reported back that their bank rec module had lost a bunch of its data. That's a bad thing. We don't want to lose money out of our bank rec. Turns out there was a blank record in one of the bank rec tables, and when they ran that utility, it triggered the symptom of removing the data. So we were able to document that, and now we know to look for that bad record before we even do those utilities. We'll remove that bad record and avoid the whole problem on the final upgrade altogether. So that's a great example of what we're looking for. Another thing we do in the course of the upgrade is we keep track of not only what we're doing and what order we're doing it, but we keep track of how long it takes. So when we get to the point of planning your final upgrade, we're able to say with some degree of certainty, not only from the review we've done, but from the actual test upgrade, how long this thing is expecting to take. And then we can make a pretty good plan to minimize your downtime and make a plan that makes sense based on reality. All right, so once we do your test upgrade, you guessed it, we turn it over to you for testing. We'll generally have a meeting. Different consultants do it different ways. My team actually will schedule you for a meeting and go through an agenda to talk about the test upgrade and give you a report. At the end of that meeting, we will release the system to you for testing. So We talked about in the beginning having an executive sponsor, and then engagement in the process all the way through is critical. There's no bigger predictor of how well a final upgrade is going to go than how well the end user tested their system. Any issues that you find that don't come up in the testing can still be fixed after you're live, but it's almost always more difficult and more painful, which translates to more expensive. For example, if there's some issue that came up, um, and it's going to require everybody to be out of the system, then we have to decide, do we want to kick everybody out at lunch today for an hour, or are we going to actually pay SWK off hours time now to go in after 5 o'clock when everybody's gone home to try to address whatever the issue was. So it's a lot cheaper to deal with that during the test, if we know about it. We always encourage people to use testing checklists. If you don't have one, or you don't want to make one, it's tailored to your specific staff and your particular things that you do in Sage, we're happy to give you a generic one. We also recommend that you assign your team to a schedule, so we not only get the system tested, but we have a time frame in mind for doing that. Of course, we know the schedule will go out the door the minute they start testing it, because your regular day-to-day work will get in the way. But just the fact of having a testing checklist and assignments goes a long way toward setting the expectation that people do need to complete their testing. All right. Another thing to mention here is, getting through the testing in a timely manner. We get the test copy, we do our work with it, we turn it over to you for testing. The longer, the older and more stale that data gets, the less reliable it is as a predictor of what to expect on the final. 6 months goes by, you may have added thousands and thousands of transactions to your system that didn't go through the testing process, and anything could happen on the final if that's the case. So we always like to see 6 months or less. If your upgrade goes longer than 6 months, sometimes clients will have us refresh the data. However, when we do that, it's additional charges. And then we start to see what we call project creep. So there's a little definition of project creep down there from Wikipedia, but basically it's when your scope tends to creep. You tend to get more cost and more time coming in that wasn't part of the original plan. And I love the last part of it. It's generally considered harmful. Anytime your project takes longer or costs more than you originally planned, I definitely would consider that harmful. All right. Let's talk about using a copy of your current Sage system versus upgrading from your live system. So we can do the upgrade either way. Um, However, there's some pros and cons to using a copy of the current system. When we use a copy of your current system, it protects your live system from having any impacts or disruptions during the testing. That's a good thing. So by using this copy method, we basically leave the original system completely intact. That means it's unimpacted by any utilities we do or anything at all associated with the upgrade. It's amazing that anything that goes wrong with your Sage during the test upgrade is automatically the upgrade's fault. We all know that happens. It's Murphy's Law. But using that copy approach keeps the original live system intact. It also means there's a step in the upgrade where we have to migrate your data from one version to the next. We call that migration. That migration requires that everybody be out of the system. So if we're migrating the data from a copy, guess what? People can be in the live system. Again, less disruption. Premium to premium upgrades. For those of you who aren't sure what premium means in Sage 100 land, that is when you have a SQL Server backend that holds your data. So premium to premium upgrades are by far the most challenging. There can be a lot of issues with SQL security, and finding the right switches to flip to be able to get the data to migrate from one to the next. If we don't nail it the very first time, it's extremely common to have the original source system of the data be broken as a result of the migration attempt. If that's a production system, you're down officially now on your live system as a result of doing that. So again, it would be much more beneficial to be able to use a copy in that scenario to figure out what the recipe is to get this to go without impacting production. Another thing as we're talking about premium here with the SQL backend is all versions of Sage 100 Premium require their own separate SQL instance. So if you didn't find that out when you switch to SQL or put SQL, your Sage 100 Premium in. I'm sorry to be the first one to tell you, but when you do an upgrade for Sage 100 Premium, you must provide a new SQL instance every single time. There is no upgrade over the top like some softwares allow. I think FAS allows an over-the-top install, but Sage 100 does not. If you are going to do a Sage 100 Premium upgrade, you will definitely need one new SQL instance. If we are going to use a copy of the production system for the test and final migrations, then you will need a second SQL instance to house that temporary copy of the production system. Another big consideration in doing an upgrade is to reuse the server or not reuse the server. So we're going to talk about reusing the same server first. There's pros and cons to almost every approach. Um, so reusing the same server, we've got a production install running here. We may or may not be using a copy. It doesn't really matter because we're on the same server. So we do have to have all users out of that server if we're going to be installing the new Sage on it. That is because we will frequently need to reboot the server multiple times. And in fact, sometimes the servers decide to reboot themselves during the process without any warning. It happens. I already mentioned previously that we have to have users out to migrate the data. So that's another consideration. If we're reusing the same server, one thing that we can run into is Crystal reports version conflicts. Conflicts are bad things, so that can be in play, and sometimes there's extra work needed to deal with those things that could be avoided if they were on a separate server. Um, Sage came out in the last couple of years with a 64-bit version of Sage 100. Everybody's been asking for that for a long time. Previously, though, Sage has always been a 32-bit application. So if we're putting the new Sage on the same server with the old Sage, and the old Sage is 32-bit, it means we need to keep the new Sage at 32-bit, at least until we do your final upgrade. So, and there are known printing issues with 64-bit Sage, with 32-bit shades, I should say. So the fix for which is putting it on 64-bit. Just had a customer this week that was in this exact situation. They ran into the printing issue because they're on 32-bit new Sage. All we can literally do is tell them, here's the feedback from Sage. That issue will go away once we can get to the final upgrade and switch you to 64. So there can be some little challenges like that. But it's not all bad news. If you do want to reuse your same server and it is supported and it does have space, etc., you potentially could avoid some work related to paperless Office. So paperless Office, again, is that feature that Sage has where it can create PDFs and optionally email those PDFs out using your email system. So if you have your paperless Office storage directory on that same server, and generally if it's not embedded within the actual installation itself, meaning it's on the server, but it's not in your Sage 100 directory. Generally, that means we don't need to move or relink those paperless files. So relinking is just the process in Sage where we tell it, here's where these files live, so that when somebody clicks on it, it knows where to open it from. Similar concept could apply to your APACH and Bankrec PosiPay files if you use those features. If they're on the same server and they're in their own little storage directory there outside of the install, very probably we can just leave those there and avoid any work to move and or change any of the settings that tell Sage where to put those files. Now, here we'll talk about the benefits of getting a new server or a new virtual machine. It's always beneficial, in my opinion, to have a new server. This allows you to carve out the whole environment separately from the production environment, which means you can really tailor that machine and you get more choices for what you can do. So it allows you, for example, to get the latest operating system. And other settings that might be more beneficial to the new Sage versus the old one. The thing here about the virtual machine, let's talk about that. Virtual technology is very common these days. And in the old days, you'd physically have to go pay for a server. You'd eventually show up 6 months later, and it was a physical box that showed up, and they'd have to physically plug it in. These days, a lot of people are getting the virtual technology, which gives you a pool of virtual resources. So you can have a virtual machine created out of sort of thin air. It's sort of a virtual instance that lives inside your main server. And because it's a virtual, you can tell it how big you want the hard drive. It's also scalable, so you can add more space to that hard drive if you want to bump it up. You can also set your RAM and do other things. So a really nice way that a lot of clients handle their upgrades is they'll spin up a new virtual server, which can be done within hours. And because of the time frame is so short, that means it's cost effective. So they'll get a new virtual server, we'll go through their test upgrade, we'll get them live, and then they can recycle or turn off, if you will, decommission the original old server, returning those resources back to the virtual pool, essentially recycling those servers from upgrade to upgrade to upgrade. Very, very slick way of doing it. Now, here we're going to turn it over to Noah to talk about cloud versus on premises.
Thanks, Bruce. Awesome info so far. Yeah, very good segue into the cloud versus, yeah, on-prem, right? So I think a good place to start with this is what can be hosted, because the cloud is become somewhat of a loose term and a fun buzzword that we like to use in movies and media, right? But what can be hosted? At the end of the day, a Windows software more than likely can be hosted. More specifically, anything that can be installed on a Windows terminal server more than likely can be hosted. Now, some caveats with that, but to keep it kind of general, anything can be installed on Windows terminal server, aka Sage, for example, Sage 100 or the Sage suite as well. There's also software that are already cloud-based that are more of that, yeah, web-based specific, where you have to go to a company's website to access it, right? And that necessarily can't be put in the cloud again, because you can't cloud a cloud, so to speak, right? So there's web-based software that are technically already in the cloud, and there's also hybrid software that have a desktop or an installation path on the environment, but also communicate with like a cloud-based instance that we talked about a second ago, right? So there's a lot of different shapes and sizes, but again, the rule of thumb is if it can be installed on your computer or server right now, and it's not a extremely old piece of software, it can likely be moved to the cloud. So again, if you're on the latest 3 years of Sage 100, that can certainly be put in the cloud. You're not losing any functionality, and it's not some diminished version that's losing modules or configurations or whatnot, right? All the stuff that Bruce has talked about applies. What we find is our clients' favorite things about moving to the cloud. The first one is by far everyone's favorite, is anywhere anytime access from any device, a lot of any's, right? So that allows you to not be stuck if you have a Mac at home, to just have it be accessible via your PC at work, for example, or vice versa. Any device that you use, even if you're at the you're enjoying your vacation on the beach, as long as you have Wi-Fi and making sure it doesn't get in the keyboard, you're able to access. Along the same note of that, though, if you have an iPad or a any sort of like Android device or tablet, right, you're able to access there too. You don't need the fastest internet known to man. You just can't have slowest internet known to man. Normal hotspot or home or business internet's gonna do you just fine there. One of the other really interesting things that sometimes people forget about is that the updates are very easy. And what that means is instead of have someone going to each person's workstation and updating Sage 100 on this one and this one and this one, and you go down the line, one Sage update or upgrade accomplishes the same for all users. So it's a complete upgrade or update, can't talk, across the board there. So less coordination, less stress, less people going on. One person's using an older version, newer version. It's just more synchronized at the end of the day. Another awesome thing that our clients talk about is VPN or no VPN access. If VPNs aren't maintained correctly and set up correctly from the get-go, they can become more of a nuisance than sometimes you think about. It can be kind of clunky, can be cumbersome for accessing, it takes longer than anyone really anticipates it from accessibility standpoint. So the way that we typically like to set up for our clients as a direct line into the environment without having to use any VPN. And because of that, it's one less thing your IT team or a third-party IT company has to maintain for you at the end of the day. So easier direct line access. It also, going back to a point that Bruce had mentioned on the previous slide, is the scalability and cost savings. So let's say you're on an old server and you need a new one. Well, servers that they're not cheap. If you're getting a server that can handle your workflow and handle Sage and is built to last and can, you're not gonna have to replace it a year from now, that could be a pretty hefty CapEx cost right there. Plus you have to worry about, again, the licensing. How are you gonna back that server up? What kind of security do you have on it? Disaster recovery in place? Do you have Microsoft licensing for Excel and Outlook and the Office suite, right? So there's a lot of different costs, a lot of different factors that come into getting a new server, as well as the electricity itself, right? You're constantly having to keep that server on, it's huffing and puffing. You're paying electricity on that too. So moving to a cloud solution for Sage, if you need an additional user created new virtual machine or VM, like Bruce had talked about, spun up, that could take hours, it could take minutes, depending upon the workload from our team, right? So, or any cloud team that you're working with. So it's easy from that standpoint, and again, less from a CapEx standpoint, and the clouds become very affordable too. So definitely saving on costs there. There's the peace of mind where Noah mentioned security licensing before, but you don't necessarily have to have a security team monitor a cloud solution 24/7, because if you're partnering with a good cloud partner, they have that built in for you. Having a security operations team or a SOC team and a network operations team or a NOC team, SOC and NOC is what they call in the security space, overlooking your infrastructure that your Sage is living on. So if, knock on wood, someone clicks on something they're not supposed to, they shouldn't be doing that, but the security team that you're partnering with has your back on that, instead of having to, again, maintain these security licenses on premise, making sure you have antivirus, even SIM if you're familiar with security technology, a lot of different things that go along with that. Multi-factor authentication is another big one, or MFA or 2FA, goes by a lot of different names nowadays, but all that's typically built into a solid cloud solution for Sage. Now, if you haven't guessed it by now, we also do offer cloud services for Sage here at SWK. We call it our SCS, or Secure Cloud Services uh, hosting here. And what makes us unique, as you can see by all of Bruce's awesome intel that he's talking about, is that our team has extensive knowledge with working with Sage 100. Doesn't matter the year, the version, standard, advanced, premium, we've hosted it time and time again very successfully, and we build our environment specifically catered around that. Again, we know the ins and outs from a geeky backend standpoint that it needs to adhere to, and the security measures that it needs to be kept at as well. And because of that, our expertise with Sage 100 and our expertise at the hosting of it, we're able to create one team that's able to service you from all different standpoints. Um, one centralized team or location for everything Sage related at the end of the day. So it makes your life easy. You don't have to worry about managing this. You can do the things that you're wanting to do from an accounting standpoint, running the business, whatever your role actually implies, unless you're on the IT side, then we can tag team that with you, obviously. And because you guys have attended this webinar today, we're also offering a really awesome special offer. So you get 1 free month of hosting when you schedule your Sage 100 upgrade. So, that can be a very nice savings for you there. And we'd love to explore that if there's a Sage upgrade on the horizon. I will kick it back over to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Noah. Free sounds like a pretty good price to me. All right, moving on here. After you've done your testing, we done your planning, you did your testing, we, you signed off. The last sort of major phase is going to be your final upgrade. So we will have a meeting together. We'll go over it based on what we know from your test. We'll put together a detailed schedule. And basically be set. This is just a screenshot showing one such schedule. This poor consultant, which actually happened to be me, this is a very recent one. I unfortunately had to get up and be at work at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. This particular client could not have any downtime. They're a multi-state operation, and they had to have the system up and running by Monday morning. So I got to spend the weekend there taking care of that. But notice everything above the final upgrade day one, everything above that was client responsibilities. Those are all people that worked at the client that did all those different tasks. So it truly is a joint effort, all the way from the planning, all the way through the final upgrade. It truly is a joint effort. Engagement is the key in the whole process. A few things about partnership don'ts. Basically, we need you to engage in the whole process. So I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but I'm just going to talk about a couple things here real quick. A good one is, hey, I set my installed modules in. Can't you just give me a quote? Just think about the scenario where let's say you have the core modules, GL, AR, AP, and bank rec, and you have one company. Well, great. You've got 5 modules in one company. What if you're a medical billing practice though, and you have 50 live companies? Do you think it might take a little longer for 50 than it would for one live company? Of course it would. So that is why we have to do a system discovery to get through the process. Another one just to talk about is that you guys are the owner of your system, and just because somebody did an upgrade for you in the past doesn't mean that we know everything about your Sage or everything that may have happened to it since the last upgrade. We mentioned 6 months is a long time for the data. Really, if your system hasn't been looked at in 6 months by a Sage consultant as far as doing an upgrade, it's probably due for another look just to make sure everything is set correctly. Um, so, and then we talked about some project creep. If you don't test in a timely fashion, things tend to kind of come out of the woodwork little by little, and it tends to create some project creep. All right, so engagement is the key. Whoops, I got trigger happy there. Partnership dues is engagement, of course, is the main thing through the whole process. Whether it's the billable part of the project or the non-billable part, the more you engage in every step, the better we're going to be. Another one of my other ones here is don't assume malintent. There can be some stress involved in doing upgrades. Things don't work quite right sometimes, or we want this thing done or that thing done and it's not going right, or we're fighting through some kind of errors. Your Sage consultant, I promise you, wants nothing more than to make this go as well for you as they can. And it's a tough job. And that goes both ways. We have to know that your job is tough. You've got a full workload. And just because you haven't been able to get to test it because you had an audit this week doesn't mean that we should assume that you don't want to test it or don't have the best of intentions. So be kind to everybody and engage in the process and be a problem solver. All right. And so that's really what it's all about, is engagement. It's like a lot of things in life. The more you engage, the better results you're going to get. And that's pretty much the presentation. I'd like to open it up for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. That was a ton of great information about, what the Sage 100 process looks like and everything like that. So we are going to open it up for questions. If you haven't had a chance to get a question in yet, you can go ahead and put that in the questions section of the GoToWebinar. And Bruce, I think we're going to go back to that Q&A slide for a bit. So we've already got a good few questions in there, so I will get those asked to Bruce in just a moment. But before we dive in, and while you're getting those questions in, we'd like to run a quick poll just asking, what are your next steps? So, we're talking a lot about Sage 100 upgrades here and a little bit about hosting. So are you interested in upgrading your Sage 100 and getting that free month of hosting offer? Are you going to start planning your Sage 100 upgrade now that you know what the process looks like? Do you still want a little bit of more information about what Sage 100 upgrades are like as a process and what that's going to be like for you and your business, or a little bit more about cloud hosting and the different options there? And, if you're kind of like, I'm a little bit of all of these things, then you can definitely put in multiple responses for this poll. Bruce, I think we've got some great questions to get started. So we'll leave this poll open for just a few more moments and dive in. And out there in the audience, like we said, this is all the information about Sage 100 upgrades and those questions you might be a little bit hesitant to ask. So if you have a question, now's the time. We've got our experts with us. We'd love to answer anything we can on this session. And if it's a little bit too complicated, then we'll take it offline and we'll have someone reach out to you directly so they can get you an answer that's specific to you and your business. I'm still seeing a little bit of activity there on the poll, so I'm going to give it just a few more seconds. I don't want anyone, I'd love to hear from everyone we can. Okay, let's dive in. So, Bruce, the first question I have for you is, will my history move over to the new Sage 100 version?
Great question, and that's a good question because I get it all the time. The answer is yes. So every scrap of data, every penny, every debit, every credit, wherever it is in your Sage system, when we migrate the company over, assuming it's included in the upgrade based on the company code, all of that data will come over as is. We will not lose any data. Now, that's also an important question because in the old days, especially, people used to have the practice of making a copy of their company at the end of the year. And then they would do that every year. And so, over 10 years, now you've got your real company plus 10 years worth of backups or essentially copies of it. And, Sage will purge data when you do your year-end close based on your history retention, but based on the work that's involved in an upgrade, every bit of your data will come over from every company that we bring over to your Sage. You will not lose any data.
That is great to know, really great to know. The next question I have, I think, is more for you, Noah. So we had someone in the audience ask, what makes SWK's hosting different from other hosting options?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of hosting providers out there. I think the first one, it definitely would be our expertise with Sage 100. Sage 100 is very specific, depending upon obviously if you have even premium, it's even more specific, right? So um, partnering with a hosting provider that knows your software inside and out is definitely what sets SWK apart from a Sage standpoint. We also offer dedicated hosting, so you get your own specific slice of the pie. Other clients with Sage or insert software here, they get their own slice. So you're able to customize your solutions from a software, security, server resource like CPU, RAM, and storage standpoint. So dedicated hosting. Then also bring on full infrastructure too. We also have our own security operations team or SOC team here at SWK. So we don't outsource that or anything. That's all in-house here. So we have security expertise monitoring things 24/7. Also, we have MFA on there too. Last thing that comes to mind, besides us backing up 3 times a day, which is pretty good in the industry, is that we know what the environments need to be scoped at. So again, our familiar with Sage allows us to be able to make sure your servers have enough resources, virtual machines or VMs, everything needed to successfully host Sage optimally. So there's a lot more, but those are the ones that come to mind there, Courtney.
Yeah, that is a lot of great reasons. I didn't even know some of those myself, so that is awesome to know. We'll keep on rolling. We've got good questions coming in. So, Bruce, another one for you is, what if I have a really old Sage 100 system like Mass 90 3.71 or other? Is it a double upgrade my only option there?
Well, you can't see it, but I have a big grin on my face because you said MAS 9371. For those of you who don't know, that probably goes back to about the year 2000-ish. So Sage has, been gradually rewriting their software from about that time up until, just to right now, even with the replacement of work order and MRP with production management and IRP. If you're below, you might remember one of the slides I said, if you're below version 450, service update number 8, you're looking at doing a double upgrade. But there is another option, and this is actually a really good option for a lot of people. In some cases, it makes more sense to re-implement your software than it is to upgrade it. So what's the difference? The difference is we install a brand new Sage just like we would for an upgrade, only we don't migrate that historical data. We literally will give you import templates and or we'll export the data out into there and push it back into Sage. Getting clean master files gives you an opportunity to clean up the inventory items, clean up the vendors, clean up the customers, clean up that chart of accounts, and you end up with no history because it's like implementing a new software. But that can be a huge benefit if you can do without the history. We can import some GL history. We don't typically do any other types of history. We generally don't do GL history, but we can. So if you want some comparative financial reports, for a couple of years worth, one option if you're really, really old is to re-implement your software. That can avoid a lot of the really problematic utilities that have to be done for all kinds of different areas, such as the general ledger. There was one point where you had to fix every out of balance entry and all the accounts have to be valid. So we can avoid a lot of the minutia in terms of trying to prepare the data when it's that old by just re-implementing your software. Also a great way to clean up your master files.
That is awesome to know that there is another option there, in a way, maybe to get kind of a fresh start after years and years of data, which is sometimes needed. So good to know that there's other options out there. We got a few more questions, great questions coming in, so you can still submit questions if one comes to mind. This question is about timing for Sage 100 upgrades. So this person asked, does it matter when a Sage 100 upgrade is performed, whether that be the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year? And do most clients perform upgrades at the end of their fiscal year? So Bruce, can you tell me a little bit about timing your upgrade?
Sure. The timing is flexible. It doesn't have to be done at the end of the year. In fact, many times you don't want to do it during the end of a fiscal year because you've already got a lot going on. So what we try to do, so there's absolutely no requirement that it happens at the end of a month, end of a year. What we look for is when is the least disruptive time. So if you're a seasonal business, let's say you're busy you sell tire chains, so you're busy in the fall and the winter. Well, we might want to think about doing your upgrade over the summertime. A lot of clients, will prefer to do their upgrades mid-month so that they stay away from their monthly, year month-end close. So the key is it's flexible, and it's flexible based on when it's the least disruptive for you.
Great. Another question we had is, when testing on a copy and working day to day on our live version, will we then need to redo the activity that took place between creating the test copy and going live?
Excellent question. The answer is no. The two systems are completely separate. So you can do crazy wild things that you would never do in your real system while you're testing it. And then when we do your final upgrade, we will re-migrate the data, regardless of whether it's from the live system or from a copy. We will essentially re-migrate that data, capturing every last debit and credit that you had where we cut the system off to bring over to the new system. There will be no double entry of any data.
That is really great. That really, I think that takes something off of in those in between days. So that's good to know. This next question, Bruce, will hopefully you're able to answer this one, and we might need some more. This might be more of a one-on-one conversation. But this person's asking about third-party systems. So they said, what is advised if our third-party system is not compatible with the Sage 100 upgrade? A year ago, we implemented a third-party program, and they've struggled to integrate with Sage 100 then.
It's such a key question. It's such a key consideration that almost nobody thinks about until it's bitten them. So the first thing is that if you're thinking of adding any kind of a third party to your Sage system, you need to take the time to do your due diligence, and you need to ask a lot of questions. It's not just about how much does it cost, and seeing the sales slick and going, yep, that's cool, I want to buy it. You have to dig deeper. You have to ask questions, or at least you should ask questions about how long does it take your organization to get this software that we're looking at. How long does it take you to get up to date? If Sage ask them if Sage comes out with a new version, or service update, how long is it going to be until your organization, we can rely on you to have your software up to date so that we can then keep pace with what Sage is doing. And if they tell you that they're a year behind, that's a red flag, or it can be a red flag. Um, so so that's the key. When we do your software discovery, we call it, when we're doing that evaluation, that free evaluation where we're looking under the hood, part of what we're doing is documenting what third parties you have. And our project coordinators, when they get that information back in from the consultants, their job is to basically reach out to those third parties and validate what they are compatible with and any cost that would be associated with it. But the best answer to that is do your due diligence up front and pick a vendor. Don't just look at one. If there's a solution that has multiple options, ask those questions about how quickly they can keep up to date, because the cheaper solution may cost you more in other ways. So take that into consideration.
That's a really great answer, Bruce. And I'd love to add to that also and say that SWK is very specific in partnering with a lot of great third-party add-ons for Sage 100 specifically and our other solutions. And we really make sure the people that we partner with are not only, supported by the publisher themselves. So, Sage supports that version, but they're, really good third-party add-ons that are those people that stay up to date and make sure that their product's there. And so that is we put other webinars on to share some of these third parties. So definitely check those out. And you can also, go to our website at swktech.com, and we have those listed under our ERP drop down as our ERP add-on. So that's another way to discover ones that, we have a close partnership with, that we trust and know they are good solutions for you. Not that there's not others out there as well, like Bruce said. So I think we have a few more questions coming in. So, I think this person answered their own question, but I don't think it hurts to share, Bruce. Someone wanted to know how they can find out which version they have. Can you share where to find that in their Sage 100?
Sure, I can. If you have your Sage 100, up on your screen, we call that the desktop. All you need to do is navigate across the very top menu bar over to the Help and choose Help About, and it will tell you your Sage 100 version. You can also go to File Run, which is in the upper left corner, and type *info. However, use of the File Run menu does require a security permission, whereas the Help About should be available to any user.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's other people out there wondering the same thing. Another question, we'll see if we're able to answer this one online or offline. This question is more about migrations, Bruce. So for those of you out there who don't know, not only can you can upgrade your Sage 100, but if you want to go to a true cloud ERP, we also have other options like Sage Intacct, among other ERPs. So this person said, we've already signed up for SWK to migrate us from Sage 100 to Sage Intacct. Will all of our Sage 100 history move to Sage Intacct, or will we lose that history/detail? Is that something you
Well,
can answer, Bruce?
well, not really. You'll have to check with your Intact consulting team on that. My suspicion is, just working in the industry as a consultant myself, even though it's not the same software, my suspicion is they would be able to import some history, but exactly what history and where, the devil's in the details. So my guess is they'd be able to import some GL history. They may or may not be able to import other history. See your Sage 100 consulting team.
Yes, so they are both Sage products, but like I said, Bruce is a very, very expert in Sage 100. He knows a lot about Sage 100, so didn't want to throw you under there with Sage Intacct, but just so for the people out there, that is an option. If you're starting to outgrow your Sage 100, even with an upgrade, there we do have true cloud ERP options that you can explore with the same SWK team, working with you, staying within SWK. So we will get that question, answered specifically. We'll have someone from that team reach out to you. And then I think that is all for our questions to Bruce and Noah. We did have someone ask, how can I get a copy of this webinar? So this recording will be sent to you if you were registered and could attend or couldn't attend tomorrow afternoon. You can also download a copy of the deck itself in the handout section right now. So if you haven't taken that chance to do that, go ahead and do that, because it will not be included with the recording. So you can download the handout, you'll get the recording tomorrow. And then after that, you can find it on our YouTube channel if you want to share it with other people on your team. So I want to thank you all so much for taking some time out of your busy Tuesday to be with us on this session. We hope you found it really informative about the Sage 100 upgrade process. And if you think of any questions after the session, do not hesitate to reach out to your SWK rep. Reach out to us at info@swktech.com, and we'll be happy to connect you with the right person on our team to get those questions answered for you. So thank you so much. And thank you, Noah and Bruce. That was a lot of really great information, and we so appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.